Days after US President Donald Trump sat with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on the sidelines of the G7 summit in France and mentioned that the US is going to have a trade agreement with India, there were high expectations from a visit of the US Trade Representative Jamieson Greer to India. However, the visit that concluded on Wednesday failed to witness a major breakthrough between India-US ties vis-a-vis the bilateral trade agreement. Expectations were especially high because the US ambassador to India, Sergio Gore, had remarked on May 30 that the deal was 99% ready. Now, while Greer was on a 3-day visit to India and held talks with India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal, which also at one point of time included Gore himself, there has been no breakthrough reported by both sides. And India noted after the visit that discussions between the two sides focused on pathways to conclude an interim agreement as a milestone towards a comprehensive bilateral trade agreement, and added that both sides reaffirmed their commitment towards signing a bilateral trade agreement which is balanced, commercially beneficial, and delivers tangible benefits for businesses, farmers, workers, and consumers in both countries. However, the lack of a breakthrough between the two sides over the interim trade agreement has led to a sense within trade experts to the effect that it may be possible that India is in fact delaying or even rethinking a bilateral trade agreement with the United States. Trade experts say that trade negotiations appear to remain stuck largely because the original bargain, as underlined in the India-US joint statement of February 7, 2026, remains collapsed. In fact, the joint statement between the two sides issued on February 7, 2026 states that Washington offered to reduce the reciprocal tariffs slapped on India from 25% to 18% in exchange for far-reaching concessions from the India side on agriculture, energy, defense, aircraft, and advanced technologies. However, they note that the February 20 ruling of the US Supreme Court invalidating the reciprocal tariffs have eliminated the only American concession that was on offer in the proposed agreement. They note that Washington is in fact now asking India to negotiate on benefits that it can no longer legally deliver. Ajay Srivastava of the Global Trade Research Initiative says that the proposed bilateral trade agreement increasingly comes across as a one-way market access rather than a balanced trade pact. He notes that New Delhi would undertake permanent commitments while receiving little certainty in return, adding that if the bilateral trade agreement is signed, it is not going to be any protection from future US trade actions, given that the US administration has invoked Section 301 proceedings and impose trade restrictions on even those countries which have signed a trade agreement with the US. Srivastava notes that in these circumstances, India may find it more prudent to keep delaying or rather abandoning a rush bilateral trade agreement rather than locking India into any obligation whose cost would far exceed any temporary relief offered by Washington. So clearly, while there have been high expectations from negotiations going on between the two sides, it seems that there are sticking points that remain unaddressed and may even further delay or even lead to an abandonment of the bilateral trade agreement altogether. Now, we'll keep tracking this major development between India and US ties. This is me, Shikha Salaria, reporting from New Delhi for India Abroad.